Hello and welcome to Mars. I'm Mick. We're playing Stationeers. Now, last time we looked at some heating and cooling methods for our beginner base. We've got our active and passive controls for our heaters, some automation. But now we want to look at what are we going to do when we want to heat a much bigger base. So let's pop over to the other bigger base and have a look. So here we are in our bigger room. Now we've got a lot more windows, a lot more space in here, so we're collecting a lot more heat when the sun comes out. So what I've opted for here is we've gone for this same passive system that we used in the other base there. It's just a much bigger version of it. It's being controlled with a digital valve there, so that is our on-off. So that's our passive system being used here. But if you're on, say, Vulcan or something like that, where you have a bigger base, you will need something a little bit more than your passive cooling. So that's where you have to go to our active system. And here we have our active cooling system. Well, it's actually a heater as well as a cooler. You just set your temperature, press start, and away it goes. Now, this is a variant on one of the RocketWerkz kits, and it is the air conditioning unit. So we'll take atmosphere in one side, push it out the other side, and any waste heat or cold will go into the waste tube. So if we press start, I've got a pipe analyzer hooked up to the waste tube, so it's trying to cool down to 20 degrees. So you see it's dumping all the waste heat into the output pipe. Now the amount of power that the thing uses will depend on how hot that pipe is getting. So at the moment it's using about 313 watts there. As that pipe gets hotter and hotter, it will chew up to 6 kilowatts of power. So it can be a very expensive way, power-wise, to cool your base. It's one of the things that sort of makes this one a little bit of a less popular way of doing it. But the thing that sort of really sort of annoys a lot of people with this one here is if you try and make a connection anywhere in your system and your power goes out, you'll find the thing just shuts off for you. So every time you make a connection anywhere in your power cables, you've got to come back and switch the thing on. That can get a little irritating. But of course, as always, there's a bit of automation you can put in to fix that. Now the air conditioner unit has a value called open. If we switch it on, we see the open changes to 1, switch it off again, the open changes to 0. So that's the value we're looking for to switch it back on again. So the trick for that one is, if our logic writer is telling it switch on with 1 and the power goes off, it switches off. The logic writer is still saying 1 switch on, and the unit says no, that's the old command to switch on, I'll just ignore that. So we have a logic reader which will be reading the value back out of the machine. It will read it as a 0, as an off. Now the tricky part, notice readers and writers put it in and out. The actual switching around is done with these two units. So we have a compare unit, where you compare the logic reader with the logic writer and ask, are those two the same? Now the logic writer is 1, logic reader is 0. It'll say, no, they're not the same. It'll put out a 0 command as well. Now we have a min-max unit, which is set to turn the higher of these two units. Now these two units are now both reading 0. So the maximum of that one is a 0, which then gets sent out to the logic writer, which now changes to 0 and switches the machine down to 0, which is what we wanted. But now the logic reader will read that back, it's still reading 0. But now the compare unit can see that both these units are 0. So both units are equal, so it now puts out to a 1. The min-max unit can see between a 0 and a 1, the maximum is a 1. So it writes the 1 out to the logic writer, writes it back to the machine, and it switches on. So now if I lose power, and back on again, takes a second, and it's back on again. So now it is always going to switch it back on. Whenever power goes off, we're going again. Once again, a bit of a roundabout way of doing it, but it's all possible. As I say, I didn't figure that circuit out, so if you did it, good on you. I mean, if you're happy to write code, the code is a lot simpler than that. So here is the IC code for it. Now this is about the most simple branching statement you can find of any programs I've written, and it is a lot simpler than trying to understand the chips. Now, first thing we do is set an alias for our aircon to pin T0 just to make our code easy to read. Once again, this is not really needed. We start our loop, we load the current status of the aircon, open command. That's the same as the reader chip was doing. Now we're going to branch if it's not equal to 0. So if it equals to 0, if it's not equal to 0, the thing is operating. So basically, if it's not equal to 0, just go back to the start. Don't do anything. Just start the loop again. That's all you got to do. If it is equal to 0, it's switched off. So we just save the new open setting to 1. Switch it back on, and then go back to the start. That's it. So confirm, export, switch it on, and away it goes. Flick the power off, back on again, away it goes. It's always on. That, to me, I find a lot easier than trying to mess around with the chips. It took me maybe 20 seconds to write that code. The chips I never figured out how to do, but each to their own. I've done a lot of programming, I'm used to that, so that's the way I find it easy to do. Now, when the air conditioner is operating, as I said, it's pumping all the waste heat into the waste pipe. Temperature does rise as it's being used, and normally you put that pipe outside, you wouldn't have it sitting inside. I just got it there as an example. Now, that works fine when you're in a cold environment. So if you can put that outside in a cold place, it'll work nicely. If you're on somewhere like Vulcan, where it is very hot outside, trying to cool your base can be a lot harder, because as that pipe approaches 600 degrees, this machine's going to be operating at its maximum capacity to try and put any sort of cooling out, and it's just going to either overload your power system or drain your batteries flat very quickly. So you have to find another way of doing it. So one way to handle your air conditioning while you're on Vulcan would be to attach a waste tank to it. So during the night while it's cold, you can fill that tank or empty it, run all your cooling. It'll build up heat in there during the day. So when it gets to cold night time, this may be at 300 degrees or whatever, then you can just exchange this with the outside air, which is still about 140 degrees, but it's better than 300. So that might be the way you can legitimately cool your base. There are other options there. You can sort of cheese the physics a bit. Right, so what we've done here, we've taken the waste pipe from the air conditioner, we've piped it into a room with a heap of radiators in there. We have an active vent and a gas pressure meter in there. So you can see in there it's currently the same temperature as it is out here. The temperature is sitting at 27. So, but if I switch the vent on, you see the pressure drops down to 0. Now the temperature is suddenly dropping. The game now believes that it's very cold in that room because it's a vacuum, and the temperature will drop. So no matter how hot it is, so if you're on Vulcan, you want a constant source of coolness. A little room full of radiators is a way to do it. So now if I switch on my air conditioner, it'll try and run, it'll try and heat up that pipe, but it has a constant cold source there to try and keep it running efficiently. So now, even trying its best, it's barely getting to 6 degrees in there. It's a way of cheesing the physics, so it's not a way I like to do. As I say, if I want to keep honest there, I'll put a waste tank on there to use as a heat sink, and then just exchange the gas in that via an automated circuit during the night time when it's a bit cooler. Now that's all very well and good for cooling your base, but what about heating it? Yes, you can use the air conditioner to do that as well, but we've got a better way. We've just spent a good deal of time building ourselves our stay hot furnace. Now it uses a waste tank to capture the heat from the furnace and then use that heat to reheat the furnace and keep it hot the whole time. Now we can simply tap into that waste tank and use it to heat the base, and it is a very effective way to do it for essentially free, not free power wise. It'll still use a little bit of gas fuel every now and then to keep it warm, but it is by far the quickest and cheapest way to heat your base, especially if you're on Europa. And there we have it. So we have two rooms the same size, both gas sensors in there, hooked up to temperature meter displays, one with a wall heater, one with a single radiator, which is hooked by a digital valve up to a pipe which goes into the waste tank of our furnace. Now the furnace waste tank is operating at 583 degrees. Both rooms, as we can see at the moment, are both 26.1 degrees. If we seal them up, now we switch on the heater, it's fairly quickly rising. Switch on the other one, and we can see it is going up at a much greater rate. And as I switch it off, it'll still keep heating until the gas in that radiator and pipe equalises with the room temperature. So just that short one there, we've gained 6 degrees in that room there, and we've gained 150 degrees in this one here. So if you have a lot of heating to do, a central heating system from your furnace is by far the more effective way to heat it. Once again, you don't need a big heater array. A single panel will be plenty to heat your base. You can either have a manual switch or a digital valve hooked up to an automated system. After pitting the furnace against the wall heater, I've decided to set up another experiment with the air conditioner against the wall heater. Now the air conditioner has a rather large heat sink attached to it, whereas the wall cooler only has 3 radiators. I have set the air conditioner down as cold as it'll go. We have our 2 rooms with our 2 temperature sensors, both at the same temperature. Let's seal them up. Switch on the wall cooler, switch on the air conditioner. There we go, the air conditioner is putting out a lot more cooling than the wall heater. So it needs a much bigger heat sink. We were really expecting it to do better, weren't we? Power wise, it just switched off. It's using more power than the transformer can provide. Yeah, it's using 4.5 kilowatts. To get us that cooling is 4.5 kilowatts, 4,500 watts versus 100 watts. Wow, okay, that's expensive bit of cooling, but if you've got no other option, that might be what you have to do. As we say, I'd probably try, if you can do it, I'd probably put in a bit of passive cooling and then just use a wall cooler just as the temperature control on it to control the balance. It still does get the temperature down quite low, just does take a bit longer. But for 100 watts, just be patient. And that's about it for heating and cooling. We have tamed the power of our furnace for heating the base. We have, well, sort of tamed the air conditioner. Love it or hate it, there it is, we've used it. I still like my passive cooling and heating, but yeah, it's up to you. Go your own way, make your own rules. Till next time, happy building. See ya.